Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We have a fantastic webinar for you today. I've been anticipating this for several weeks, like I know the panelists have too. We're going to get to our dedicated, talented, and very effective speakers in just a minute. My name is Dr. Jim Duncan. I'm the president of Project Light, Anti-Human Trafficking, and we're physically located in Salisbury, North Carolina at the Rowan Community Center. I'm also proud to say that I'm a team leader of the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. We're very grateful to our presenters for joining us today. You know, it's a team effort, what we're doing, and you're going to see that today as we talk about it. I also have Madison Saunders here to my right. She's the executive assistant of Project Light. She's going to assist me and help me through the day. We have two more webinars coming up, as you can see there on the screen. November the 13th is Survivors Firsthand Stories and Experiences. And then on November the 20th, we're going to have the recent legislation relating to human trafficking and a call to action. Both of those are going to be webinars you do not want to miss. We're very appreciative of the Homeland Security article that appeared today announcing this webinar today. Thank you, Homeland Security, for that. Our special guests will explain to us their approaches to combating demand through technology. So let's introduce everyone. We have Brooke Ruffin, who's the founder of Invictus, who is the president of Street Grace. We have Nick Lambeau, who's executive director of Street Grace. Ray Dawson is the founder of Invictus Project, and Zachary Nath is the part of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, during these presentations, you may have some questions, and that'd be great. But you see that on the screen where a little Q is in that area. Just go ahead and send those questions to us. And at the end of all the presentations, we'll go ahead and address as many of those questions as we can. So let's get started first with Street Grace. And let me tell you a little bit more about them. First of all, start with Brooke. Brooke is graduated magna cum laude from the University of Florida. She has a background in advocacy and performance. She serves as vice president of Street Grace and has been a member of the team since 2018, assisting with the expansion from 1 to 4 markets. How wonderful is that? Transaction, interception, development, and design. As a survivor of child sexual abuse, she is dedicated to removing the stigma and educating people on how to protect themselves and their families from exploitation. Nick Lambeau, since 2009, has been involved in standing against human trafficking with various organizations. He's presently a board member of the Genesis Project, as well as an emeritus board member of the Shared Hope International and a founding board member of Rebecca Bender Initiative. Nick is an executive director of Street Grace, Arizona, overseeing their demand reduction cyber patrol program, and serves as a program director in a strategic partnership for the Arizona Anti-Trafficking Network, overseeing Street Grace, Just Men, Arizona. What a wonderful group we have here. Let's go ahead and start with Street Grace, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Brooke.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Thank you so much for having us today. Today we're here to talk about demand reduction, so I'll quickly get through that. And just wanted to share that Street Grace's work is streamlined through 4 pillars: prevention, protection, policy, and pursuit. And what we're here to talk about today is in that pursuit pillar. But our mission is to eradicate the commercial sexual exploitation of children. And our vision is, of course, a world where all children are free from sexual exploitation. Through that prevention pillar, we do education for parent groups, keeping kids safe in the digital age, businesses, community trainings, and we also have a youth leadership academy, which is based off the principle that a protected child is a confident child. We can give children statistics and the lay of the land of what sex trafficking is looking like today all day long, but really what we need them to be prepared for is to walk into those first relationships, to face those manipulative tactics and recognize red flags. So that's one of the very important things that we're doing here at Street Grace, as well as law enforcement training. Through Protection Pillar, we operate a 24-hour statewide hotline, as well as deliver direct services to those received through that hotline. So that's normally over a 14 to 18-month period that we're guiding these confirmed victimized youth through care coordination. Through our policy pillar, we develop legislation that not only harshens the punishments for traffickers and buyers, but also aids survivors' successful reentry into society and survivors' ability to thrive after a life of exploitation. So, as I'm sure you all know, survivors are consistently held back by charges that they occurred under force, fraud, or coercion. So, working to get those records vacated and expunged, making sure name changes aren't public records so that their traffickers can't find their new identity and track them. And also assisting communities with legislation that holds illicit massage parlors accountable, which we've had great success in here in the Georgia area. We do have an advocacy day once a year and do national policy roundtables in DC about twice a year, meeting with other wonderful nonprofits, just gauging where we are with legislation, what models we can take from state to state, what we can really learn from each other. Which brings us to Pursuit, where our demand reduction and demand-centric piece of Street Grace lives, which is through transaction intercept. So we'll get into that a bit. And Nick, you feel free to dive in. This is really where Nick excels, and his leadership brings so much to the Street Grace team. The underground commercial sex economy is such a lucrative industry. And I think that's a common misconception that people have, is that they believe that this is still an issue on a street corner. They believe that the people running this business and involved in it are not highly educated, highly successful businessmen and women. So really getting into the structure of the industry and seeing where we can disrupt, because our future generation that we're speaking to through that prevention pillar and through the Youth Leadership Academy, they are our future victimized population, but they're also our future buyer population. So truly addressing the supply and the demand of this illegal industry and how we can truly disrupt it. So when looking at what drives demand, of course, we have the normalized beliefs about the commercial sex trade and that the people being exploited are actually going to enjoy the exploitation. We hear that a lot from buyers, and that it's a mostly victimless crime, really tying in pornography there and not seeing its ties to trafficking, and that buyers are merely taking care of their needs or just being guys. Of course, the being networked with other buyers and the normalization of this culture leads to a much higher demand, and our young men are getting involved early and earlier because of their pornography addictions. Pornhub was trying to get apps on game systems a couple of years back, which are targeted to 13, 15-year-old boys. So the earlier they get them addicted, the longer period of time they are making money off of them. So again, just looking at this like the lucrative industry that it is. Our transaction intercept strategy is to build for everyone, build for collaboration, and build for progress. So we'll get into what TI is and what our wonderful cyber patrols get into on a daily basis. Nick, if you want to take it up.
Yeah, I'll just talk about the work that we started in Arizona in 2017. We started teaming up. We went to law enforcement. We worked very, very closely with the Heat Unit in Phoenix, which was a tremendous unit. It was actually featured on a PBS Frontline special. And Sergeant Brian Doty and Amber Campbell actually is now with HSI. Worked with us and talked about what did they need, what as civilians could we offer them without getting in their way, without disrupting investigations, understanding deconfliction. And so they taught us, what do they want? What would they like us to do? So one thing we look to do just as civilians is to interact with these buyers in a way to try to educate them. So we understand where we work and where we don't work, where we fit and where we don't. So the idea was to disrupt the flow. And as you all know, they go on a website, they just click on their phones and they try to text to try to talk to an individual. Well, what if they get somebody else on the other end of the line? And law enforcement said they didn't have time to try to educate. They didn't have the time to, try to get these guys to understand what was really going on. And as we've done this over 7 years, we realize, and many of you know this as you deal with buyers, you get anything from A to Z. What we really work at is the guys that we can still talk to, that, as I say, we can crack some humanity, they still have a conscience, and try to talk them over the line and try to pull them out of that pipeline. So we wanted to disrupt it. Again, not disrupt law enforcement, but disrupt the buying process. So Brooks, if you could just forward that next slide. We do it in what we call cyber patrols. Men meet once a month in teams of 3 or 4 guys. It's all online, safe and protected. There's certain things they commit to, and one is we never set up a meet. We do not go meet with the buyers. We're not anything like that at all. We just talk to these individuals online. And then again, we try to educate them. And we're always shocked how many men really many times do not understand what's really going on. Then what law enforcement has asked us is anything actionable. So to them, if a pimp is trying to recruit us, thinking we're a decoy, we lay low, we get all the information we can, and then pass that on to law enforcement. If it's a pedophile, again, we never talk to them and try to explain who we are and what we're trying to do. We pass on that information, and then law enforcement will try to chat them up. Or if somebody wants to do something publicly, that's very, very disturbing, and that has happened. Again, we play along with them. We pass that on. We actually had an incident in Tucson. HSI took care of it. Again, we work through our liaisons. So what we did is, and Brooke can go into this too in detail, but Street Grace wanted to create something that was much more automated, using the power of artificial intelligence, also with human intelligence, kind of put both together. And they came up with what they called Gracie, because there was so much, people are buying 24/7. People ask me, when do you do your patrols? You can do them anytime, because there's guys always trying to buy. So we said, hey, what if we can use artificial intelligence to begin to interact with them and begin to collect the data? So if you can forward that next slide. The idea was to better understand the buying habits and patterns of those who would attempt to purchase sex with children. And we actually have somebody in Auburn University who's going to look at the data over a period of time, begin to come up with a number of different ideas. So this, again, was first started with volunteers, a phone and a laptop. And 2018, when Street Grace was doing it, they noticed a 30% decrease in repeat callers, which means they just didn't call their numbers. But again, there was some effect. But they also sent out a therapeutic link, and there was a 15% click-through in people that were offered some help from sex addictions, not only clicking on the website, but clicking through.
And Nick, if I can jump in here, these operations, our original intention was to raise awareness about the issue. This was back, when you had to prove that this was an issue to people, which thankfully, due to advocacy efforts, we don't have to do much of today. But we still had mainly people in affluent areas saying, oh, we don't have a problem with this. This is an inner city issue. This is a lower income issue, things of that nature. So it was very helpful to go to an area that was not believing they had an issue, and we would set up an ad in their neighborhood, and we would be there live answering the phone calls from the buyers and letting them know that we were a disruption effort, and the list of ramifications their actions would bring to them. And so we were able to intercept maybe 15,000 interceptions a year just doing these manual operations. But then we were acquiring these long lists of numbers, and all we could do was offer them to law enforcement. So similarly to the origins of Nick's Cyber Patrols, we then went to our law enforcement partners and said, what can we do to aid your efforts in holding buyers accountable? We're doing this demand advocacy effort, but how can we turn this into something that would be helpful for you? because with working with law enforcement for the last decade, what we've learned is, one, the only people that struggle more than nonprofits for funding are our law enforcement partners. And it was the same process for them to get $250 approved, to get $7,500 approved. And just the amount of red tape they were going up against on a daily basis to run operations for demand reduction and to remove to remove the anonymity that buyers are thriving under. So the need was to develop something that was scalable, sustainable, and adaptable, something that removed the costly, cumbersome, and complicated process of those sting operations. So in partnership with BBDO, we developed that first chatbot named Gracie. And then since then, we caught the attention of Microsoft, and through their Microsoft Hack for Good program, where they have volunteer software engineers, we've developed a platform for law enforcement that Cyber Patrols is also using. So you're able to log on to the platform. Law enforcement is able to set a location and make arrests, export chats for their cases that they are currently working on. And essentially making it so that if your intent is to harm a child, the internet is no longer a safe place for you to hide. These are several of our collaborators that we've had input from survivor groups, law enforcement. We've been working with Microsoft's Hack for Good program for the last 2.5 years on this platform, and did a soft launch at the beginning of April of this past year. So this is essentially how it works. Like Nick said, they go and they search on these online on nefarious websites, and they would click on an ad. That ad has a number associated with it, and that number is what is created within this transaction intercept platform. So you would go in, you would set an operation, you would spin up a bot, meaning you would select a phone number in that area that would then reflect the qualities that you've put in for that bot. And then you could watch that buyer and all of the buyers responding to that ad converse with this AI chatbot. And then you can manually take over the conversation as well. So again, these are some goals. Of course, it's wonderful to waste the time of buyers and to do as many demand reduction efforts as we possibly can, but we wanted to do more than that, more than provide law enforcement with thousands of numbers. And so we're implementing some risk mitigation into the platform as well to raise the most severe cases up to the top that garner their attention. So things like Nick mentioned, confirmation of wanting to purchase, the abuse of a minor, violent language used, if they have been a repeat suspect in the platform, all of that is logged to a permanent file for that buyer and available to law enforcement. The great thing about any technology platform is that we are still innovating. And so we have law enforcement partners onboarded now. We have Cyber Patrol teams onboarded now. And so that new features are being implemented every month. We meet once a month to talk about the features that we need to implement. We have detectives sending us notes and things that would be helpful for the cases that we're working on. So if anybody is interested in kind of the collaborative development process of this platform, we would love to have you working with us. Since April, we have intercepted and over 250,000 text exchanges from buyers. And that's from 11,000 plus individual buyers and 15,000 transactions. So even from the soft launch, kind of the friends and family launch that we've had, we've made great progress and have already developed the largest data set on buyer activity available. So like Nick said, our director of research will be diving into that in partnership with 2 universities next summer. And numbers, I'm a numbers person. I love numbers, but statistics sometimes don't tell the full story, because we, of course, would be doing this work if one child was being exploited. And if you have the number of exploited individuals, you still don't have how many times that individual was purchased. So the real number that we need is the buyers and the demand, and that's how we truly make a difference in the illicit underground commercial sex economy. So every conversation that a would-be predator has with Gracie is one that is not being had with a real minor. So that
But let
15,000
me- Yeah, let me throw something out here too, which is, I think, important, that we do send a deterrent message to every one of these buyers. It can be crafted any way we want it. We do encourage them to seek help, but we let them know their information is being recorded. The other thing is, and I mentioned, they're sent a therapeutic link as well. One other thing I want to add to this, which we're very, very excited about, we've just launched a new Protect Young Boys initiative. And we've decided to take that on and begin to post these bots again on the websites where men are seeking boys or men are seeking other men. So it's kind of a new initiative for us and a new task, but I'm excited about it because we all know that a number, whether it's transgender youth, and we can also get into that someday as well, and plan to, and then young boys that need to be protected along with young girls. So that's exciting to me, just to see that we are taking the whole, how do I say, fight to where these individuals are, and how they do need to know somebody's watching.
For sure. And that brings up an important aspect of this initiative. Something that started out, like we said, as an advocacy effort, has turned into an AI investigative platform. And that's something that uh, opportunity has just followed impact in that way and continued to open doors. So like Nick said, that deterrence message that is sent, you can have operations going that are demand reduction efforts in your town without anybody having to intervene at all. Nick's teams intervene to provide more education and to intervene specifically with that buyer. We have law enforcement taking over conversations to set locations and make that arrest, but some law enforcement is going to set up that deterrence message and just let the bots do the work of doing the demand reduction for them in their town. So we're very pleased, of course, to have almost unintentionally built this buyer's data set that we'll be able to provide a lot of research on, and also protect the mental health of our officers, because the toll that it is taking and the turnover that you see in specifically ICAC units of bureaus of investigation is getting in the way of progress. But they're having to talk about these terrible subjects with terrible people after hours, over the weekends, because of course, if you're running a sting operation, it's going to be pretty obvious if the buyer's only talking to somebody between the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So our officers are having to push beyond healthy boundaries and converse with these buyers over days. And now, once we get risk mitigation in here, they'll be able to go in. The conversation will already be at the point where they can just set that location, make that arrest. The photos are all blurred. They have to physically go in and click to unblur them, so that we're also protecting our officers' mindset as from that perspective as well. And then again, everything you can export to provide backup for your case in court. So again, currently in development, we're seeing great success thus far, and anybody who would like to get involved, please feel free to reach out for a demo. It's difficult to briefly talk about this, Nick, without it going straight into a demo and pulling up the platform. So we're leading demos of the platform every week. If you're interested, please feel free to either reach out to Nick or myself, and we'll get something scheduled for you. Again, it is free for all law enforcement and other nonprofit partners to use. But thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, and I think another thing I just want to finish with is we do use AI photos, and they have been extremely effective. And we feel like it's less of a re-victimizing, whether it's boys or girls. And I've been surprised at watching men have no clue that this is an AI photo, which just again, I think is comfortable for us to feel like, hey, we're not taking advantage of anybody in any way. So that's been a great thing. And again, these guys are interacting. Most the long conversations they have are amazing with the bots. So it's again is a good time waster. Law enforcement that I know in Phoenix are using it to just create leads, taking those phone numbers that that are coming in. So But again, I do thank you, as Brooks has, and I look forward to working together.
Thank you, Brooke and Nick. One thing about the Street Grace is Project Light is a partner with the Cyber Patrol teams, and Nick has been down to our place a couple of times, and it's so excellent, such an excellent program. It's so needed. And one thing in North Carolina, if folks don't know it, that sex buying has been a misdemeanor. But starting December the 1st, sex buying is going to be a felony. How wonderful is that? And
Awesome.
The North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force and you folks and so many other anti-human trafficking teams have been up to Raleigh, beating on the doors to try to make this happen. And congratulations, it's happening December the 1st. I did want to ask one thing, Brooke and Nick, is have you ever used the like major events? Have you ever Super Bowl and all that? Have we ever done anything in that area?
We actually did it as a demo right before the Super Bowl. We did it the week before this last year in Vegas, and that's actually where we kind of cut our teeth and did a beta test. So, but yeah, we did it in Arizona, the Final Four. Anytime there's a large gathering, we've done extra patrols and then obviously spin up a lot of bots to gather the data.
Wonderful. Y'all are doing an excellent job and really appreciate it. And we'll come back to it a little bit later here. You folks just keep the questions coming in and we'll address them more toward the end. Next, I wanted to talk about Invictus and have them share with us a little bit. And let me tell you a little bit about these two guys that are going to be talking, first of all. Ray Dawson is a sworn detective with the Randolph County Sheriff's Office, assigned to the Invictus Task Force. Ray is a digital forensic examiner, analyst, and investigator. He's a member of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, the North Carolina Human Trafficking and Demand Reduction Task Force. Ray currently resides in Central North Carolina with his wife and works in the ministry since 2006 with a focus of international counter human trafficking that began in 2015. In 2021, Ray founded the Invictus Project, nonprofit to combat the domestic trafficking and sexual exploitation of children. He's a veteran of the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service, Ray, and has worked as a military contractor for the U.S. Army Special Operations Community since 2021. Zachary Neath is the criminal investigator with Homeland Security Investigation in Greensboro. He's responsible for 14 counties in central North Carolina, including the 4-county area covered by the Invictus Child Exploitation Task Force. Special Agent Neath is Homeland Security's full-time representative and specializes in proactive online investigations targeting child sexual abuse material distribution, travel online enticement cases, and providing investigative support and resources to state, local internet crimes against children affiliates. What a group we have here today, folks. I hope hundreds of you have chimed in today to be part of this. But without any further ado, let me turn this over to Invictus and let you guys take it from there.
Thank you, Jim. Like you said, my name is Ray Dawson. I'm the founder of the Invictus Project. We founded the organization in 2021 with a focus on the domestic effort here in the United States, trying to find out, just trying to chart a course on how the nonprofit world can come alongside and really make a difference in this fight directly, right? And so we have and Zach, if you can go ahead and throw that slide deck up if you can. And we kind of, as we took a look at this fight and said, what does this look like in the state of North Carolina? We wanted to kind of start close and see exactly what we can do in our local area. And that's when I really got exposed to what we refer to as ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, and cyber tips, and how that is just an overwhelming issue that law enforcement is dealing with. And if you're not familiar with ICAC, once again, it stands for Internet Crimes Against Children. And this organization deals with cyber tips that are reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the form of what we refer to as ICAC tips. And that is when a image or a video that depicts the sexual abuse or exploitation of a child is reported online. It's reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's pushed out to the state that has jurisdiction over where this incident happened. And then ultimately it's assigned to an investigator to investigate it. And what we learned in the very beginning, and I have some stats I'll kind of go over it with you kind of quickly, is that in 2019, the state of North Carolina alone had 4,930 of these cyber tips and reported in the state of North Carolina. And the North Carolina ICAC task force has approximately about 300 affiliates that investigate these crimes. And as you can see, 300 affiliates investigating almost 5,000 cyber tips is just overwhelming. But as we went into the COVID era, and we noticed this huge uptick. You know, the schools were closed down. We sent our children home with computers to do their schoolwork, and they were just isolated. And so what we noticed on our data in the year 2020, those cyber tips increased to just over 9,000. In 2021, they increased to just right over 12,000. And in 2023, that number jumped to over 26,000. And for 2024, we're on pace to eclipse 30,000 cyber tips just in the state of North Carolina alone. Unfortunately, and that's about a 580% increase in the number of cyber tips since 2019. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that there has been almost no increase in the number of investigative affiliates that are investigating these crimes. So that's when we just took a step back and said, how can we help affect this fight, and what are law enforcement's needs? And really what it is, it's manpower and resources, right? So the Invictus Project formed working with our local law enforcement partners, Randolph County Sheriff's Office, Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, the Alamance County Sheriff's Office, and Davidson County Sheriff's Office. We formed a task force, and that was on the heels of a undercover operation called Operation Child Predator that we conducted in August of 2023. And as a result of that 3-day operation, we arrested 19 pedophiles that had came to the central part of North Carolina as part of this UC operation with the expectation to have sex with what they believed to be a minor child. Immediately then we realized this is an area in which we can really make a difference. So the task force was formed. We collaborated with all of our local partners, our state partners with the State Bureau of Investigations, and of course our federal partners jumped in immediately, Homeland Security investigations, to be able to collaborate to make a difference in this fight. And what we've seen, obviously, as a result of that, each agency committed investigators for this fight, because that's the overwhelming problem that most investigators across the state of North Carolina, and I know it's not unique to just North Carolina, it's a problem that the United States law enforcement faces, and it's a lack of manpower. So most of these investigators that are assigned to do these type of investigations also have other collateral duties. And a lot of times they're not able to focus on this solely. So with the vision of the Invictus Task Force, all the investigators assigned to the task force have a single lane of effort. And that is to actually, we have no other job but to investigate these crimes against children. But not just manpower, they need resources, funding. And that's where the nonprofit really became a good partner. What we were able to do was leverage our ability to fundraise from the private sector to be able to supplement investigative tools for the task force, whether it be through computers, whether it be through software, or whatever needs were determined to be advantageous to continue this fight and to supplement these investigative efforts. And so just to give you a little bit of insight of what our successes look like, and since our inception, the inception of the task force started in January 1st of 2024, this year. It's our first year. And right now we're working through our proof of concept. We have, 3 priorities of work, if you will. as it pertains to the task force is number one, is this feasible? Is this a feasible option to bring these law enforcement partners together to be able to work from a single location to affect an expanded jurisdiction with our state and federal partners? That allows us to have more of a state and federal jurisdiction because all of these crimes are happening on the internet. So sometimes our perpetrators are not in our immediate area, but they can exploit children that are in our immediate area. So having those state and federal partners was absolutely essential to the success of this. And so we formed the task force. It's located in the central part of the state in Randolph County, and it has the real nucleus of the task force is the digital forensic lab. And in a few minutes, I'll let Zach talk about kind of how we conduct these investigations and how that technology is used in that. But just since our inception this year, as we as a side note, we really got into our facility as a task force in May 17th of this year. So prior to that, we just kind of were working out of sharing desks, working out of vehicles, wherever we could find a space to work, but we were collaborating and working together. And so since our inception, we've conducted just over 50 operations. We've seized 135 devices. We've closed 174 of those cyber tips. We've made 48 arrests, and which have resulted in over 150 felony charges. We have discovered 7 contact offenses that were previously unknown to law enforcement, and have rescued 3 minor children that were actually actively being offended at the time of the arrest. And also through that, with this investigation, it's not just about arresting the bad guy. One thing that's unique about this cyber investigations, a lot of times once we have the probable cause to effect an arrest or a search warrant, we pretty much know what we've got and who we're dealing with. And then we have that evidence in the form of that forensic evidence that comes from their electronic device. And so a lot of times from that point, the investigation really focuses on a victim-centered approach to the investigation. Our whole effort is to find out what other child has been affected by this suspect, this offender that we are not aware of. And then to identify those children. And so since our inception with just the cases we've worked, we've identified over 440 victims just this year. And so we have seen, and it's important for me to state that one thing that I will say that's unique about the Invictus Task Force, and
Getting any more from Ray right now.
Did Ray's sound cut out? Can you still hear me?
So something went bad on his end.
Cool. Okay. I'll pick up where Ray left off until he's back in, having some connectivity issues. So Ray was talking about victim identification efforts. And one thing that's not truly reflected in those statistics is the lead packets and referrals that we've sent to other jurisdictions. So the numbers that Ray's got recorded for the year are reflective of victims in North Carolina, specifically in our 4-county area of responsibility for the Invictus Task Force. However, the task force has been to at least 2 other states just this calendar year in order to provide victim identification services or referrals out to other states in person. The idea being, if we're going to put a packet together to send to another jurisdiction, we don't like the idea of just putting something together that's half-baked. We actually have sent investigators to the state where the offense has occurred in order to ensure that there's adequate follow-up and subject matter expertise on the ground, because you may have a one-man unit working internet crimes against children cases, and if that person is by themselves in a unit, they may not have the capabilities to execute a search warrant by themselves. So by having a unit that's full-time. Not only has that affected our local area, but it's helped with smaller jurisdictions that haven't had that capability. I had the slide pulled up when Ray was talking for the forensic lab. We had a kind of a vision for how the lab would be set up, and it says forensic lab. This is really more just the floor plan of the task force headquarters. As you can see, there's a bullpen area, and then there's the lab itself. There's a reason it's an open area. The idea being, we figured if we had more of a bullpen setup instead of individual offices, there'd be more collaboration and better communication amongst investigators. So that bullpen area is open. It's got cubicles in it. However, there's no walls that are separating everybody because we're trying to get away from that culture of siloing off internet crimes against children investigators, right? So across North Carolina, the 300 odd ICAC affiliate agencies, a lot of those are like a one-man sheriff's office operation. So you have one ICAC affiliate, he or she is in the basement, underneath the jail, underneath the sheriff's office, wherever, in a windowless room by themselves, working cases involving horrific imagery of children, which obviously for mental health reasons isn't good. I know Brooke mentioned that, but just in general, it's not good for information sharing as well. So we're trying to get around that with this bullpen setup. As you can see, the forensic labs there. What's not reflected on this is we have a set of lockers along this wall. The lockers were I guess we're still in the process of getting this forensic pipeline part of our policy and procedure finalized, but it's a set of locking lockers where we can put property in there, and it's secured. It's in a safe place for chain of custody purposes. You see there's restrooms there. What's not reflected on here either, and what you don't see, is there's no break room. Reason for that being, Ray and I have discussed this quite a bit offline. We didn't want there to be a break room right next to the office where people can get up from their desk, go to the break room, and get coffee, and then they're right back sitting in front of their computer for another 12 hours. You have to physically, if you want coffee, if you want some other, I don't know, food type item, there's a CID office that's across the parking lot, and it gives you a actual physical separation from the media. You have to get up, you have to walk outside for a minute, and even though it's an inconvenience thing, it's an inconvenience thing of design, right? It's keeping people from sitting in front of their desk for hours at a time, not getting good exercise, and obviously that's not good for mental health if you're sitting in front of your desk working this type of case. Ray, are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm back, Zach, but you're doing a great job. Go ahead.
Okay, so we had talked specifically about education and training, but not only are we trying to do enforcement efforts with the task force, but we've got a component of both between Whitney, who Ray can talk about, as well as our law enforcement partners. We're trying to provide a subject matter expertise for the area, both in law enforcement training as well as for the general public. Idea being long term that the task force is going to be able to host other agencies that may not have the subject matter expertise in ICAC investigations. We've made the facilities available for Kevin Roughton, who's the state ICAC commander. And this year, we're able to bring in our HSI, or rather DHS, Center to Counter Human Trafficking, the CCHT office, which is our national headquarters level component, to do advanced human trafficking class. The class was highly successful. We had approximately 50 attendees from across the state, law enforcement personnel. Idea being that would be something we'd like to do more of in the future. But then also you see the component for the general public. We want to have education opportunities available on the front end for youth, for teachers, etc. DHS recently launched the Know to Protect campaign. We've got materials, we've got marketing, we've got stickers, etc. to hand out. However, rather than having that top-down approach, we found it's somewhat better to have maybe that bottom-up approach sometimes. I can come in and do a slide deck that's been prepared by somebody in Washington, D.C., and that's not to disparage those efforts. There's a place for that, and those are very good. However, who better to know the needs of North Carolina school student than maybe a North Carolina educator. And that's where Whitney has come in. Ray, if you want to talk about her, she's an educator by training, and she's done very well with the prevention and presentation type stuff.
Yeah, and that definitely needs to be mentioned because you know, with our three-pillared approach, if you will, with education, advocacy, and enforcement, the enforcement component obviously is a function of government, and so as a nonprofit, we help support their logistical and their logistical needs, right, to help enhance their capabilities for having the software, having the tools that they really need that sometimes, as Brooke had mentioned earlier, that can be problematic and difficult and a lot of red tape to go through. And we're able to supplement their investigative efforts in real time with funding on immediate needs. And being directly in the fight, we understand what those needs are and the exigency of some of the items that we purchase from time to time for the task force. So that's kind of the enforcement side of it. And the education and advocacy, the education component of that is exactly that. We have to educate a generation of young people about safe online practices. And so my counterpart, Whitney Miller, she is that's her focus. She is a former educator. She's very passionate about educating children, parents, teachers, anybody that's dealing with children. People that are in positions of trust that deal with children. She's very passionate about that. And what we're doing is we're really, it allows us to get into the schools and being able to get into the churches and the community and rally in that support. So we're bringing that awareness to what this fight really looks like and trying to demolish some of the strongholds and some of the social stigmas that have uniquely plagued this effort, whether it be through social presuppositions because of movies or televisions or just how this fight has shifted and the public are not aware of it. The creepy guy in the white van, we're finding though that may happen from time to time, that's not the exigent threat that faces our young people. It's the online predators that are actively hunting them where they are socializing, and that's online. And so Whitney does a very good job with educating our children and our parents of what that looks like. We are not an anti technology organization. We believe that, of course, as technologically advanced as our society is and how it's quickly moving that direction, we do a disservice to our children by promoting abstinence from social media or abstinence from any online presence. But it is about the right technology at the right age. It's about safe online practices. And Whitney does a great job ensuring that our educators and our children have the tools to be able to keep themselves safe. And on the advocacy side of that, once again, partnering with our local law enforcement, our effort is to really be able to utilize the wraparound services for our victims that are already in place, making them aware of what these resources are and helping plug them into the right resource for the right victim. And not only that, it's collaborating with other nonprofits. We have chose to kind of pick this lane of effort, and we want to stay in this lane and really master this and work with our other partners, our CACs and our other organizations that are doing this good work, but maybe a little bit different lane of effort than what we are. Because in order for us to make a difference in this, we are going to have to work together. It's going to take every one of us in specific disciplines to work together. And I've said this often, and I believe it at my core that, sexual exploitation of children is a very unique crime in a sense of most criminal enterprises have a, supply and a demand, and this is no different. But what makes this unique is that in most other criminal enterprises, and almost every other criminal enterprise, there is a enforcement action, sometimes on the supply and the demand side. But as it pertains to the exploitation of our children, there's only an enforcement action on the demand side. And so we really need to keep our effort focused on that and making sure that not only is our community aware of it, but also that our law enforcement has the tools, equipment, and operational freedom to investigate these. And from also with that advocacy component, we have found ourselves advocating for our law enforcement partners through the community to be able to have a voice with our local politicians to be able to say, hey, we need to prioritize this. Let's get law enforcement the tools and resources they need. This is a function of government, and government needs to do a better job with prioritizing these crimes. And so that is one of the things that we love to do with our community outreach, is to rally our community, make them aware of this problem, and include them in that fight.
That's right. And just another thing we found with these safety presentations, we have Whitney out, as a non-sworn person. If we have a law enforcement investigator that goes out to conduct a safety presentation with another law enforcement partner, or with Whitney acting as a NGO partner, we found that there's been outcries, victim disclosures, whatever term you want to use for that, that you may not get otherwise. So if the pitch at the end of the presentation is, hey, if you've had a victimization, if you've had an online interaction that's resulted in something that you felt uncomfortable with, tell a trusted adult, tell a law enforcement officer, tell somebody. We found that kids respond very well to that. It's unfortunate. However, we are locating victims through these safety presentations that we wouldn't have otherwise. And by doing that, we were able to then provide an appropriate referral to the Child Advocacy Center and the jurisdiction that we're working with. I'll skip past that. I'm sorry.
I would mention also that, when it comes to the training aspect of it, as it pertains to law enforcement, what we have seen since the formation of this task force is that we've been able to get a group of subject matter experts together that are now focused on this fight. And as a result of that, we're all learning from each other. We're learning best practices. We're learning what works, what doesn't work. We're overcoming some training scars that may have occurred because maybe in your agency, you didn't get all of the training as an ICAC investigator, or didn't get enough, you didn't work enough cases to really understand what this looks like. Being able to have partners sitting in the same room that have various degrees of experience is just, I can't overstate it. And so as a result of that, we have outside agencies that are reaching out to us, some of our neighboring agencies that are reaching out and saying, hey, can you help us? And so not only are we making such a difference here in our expanded jurisdiction, but also across the state, we're helping our other law enforcement partners become better investigators, and really from a proactive perspective. In the cyber tip world, working the ICAC cases, that's reactive. Law enforcement has historically been in a reactive posture when it comes to crime. Sexual exploitation is no different. That reactive posture is a crime's committed, it's being reported, then it's investigated, and some type of enforcement action is taken. And of course, we have an overwhelming responsibility in that, with just the sheer number of cyber tips that we face on a monthly basis. However, we have also prioritized within the task force a proactive approach to policing. Our vision is to shift law enforcement from that reactive posture by getting caught up on these cyber tips that are so overwhelming, being able to get so they're manageable, so that they can have a focus on that proactive policing, so that we can hunt these predators before they have a chance to harm a child or another child in a lot of instances.
Yes, I put the challenges up because, like Ray mentioned, we've been getting, it seems like, I would say weekly, at a minimum. It's not been daily, but definitely more than monthly. There's been agencies inquiring about how to start up a task force similar to Invictus. As Ray's often mentioned, we're not trying to replace the North Carolina ICAC task force that's already in place. This is a force multiplier. So the idea being, we work with SBI, which is the state authority for coordination, deconfliction, et cetera. And it's been something that's been very well received. For that reason, we put up some challenges. This is just some things that an agency needs to consider if they're trying to start a task force up like this. Obviously, the evidence chain of custody stuff is huge. If you don't have good evidence practices, you can't make criminal cases. Construction costs, the money. That's where our NGO partner has been hugely effective and helpful with that, because they're able to fundraise in a manner that law enforcement can't do. This is a function of government, so you have government revenue sources. However, just getting the initial seed money, the initial costs up, that can be daunting. I think now that we're up, we've shown that there's a year under our belt. It's going to be very hard now that we've got that year under our belt for our government agencies to now decide they don't want to do this, given the results, given the successes we've had. But that initial cost obviously comes with the challenge. You have to have a fiduciary agency. That's the agency, if you don't know, I guess, accounting terminology, that's your agency that's handling money, right? And you have to have an agency that's willing to do that. Ideally, that's going to be an agency that's got well-established control practices with finances, so you don't run into mismanagement and or issues with funds. See if we can, sorry. We've got the burger analogy here. And like we said, we want to build the dream team from the bottom to the top. Motivator here is hard. It's the children, it's the community. We're trying to build a team of experts. And obviously we're going to have some challenges as we go along. We're coming up on our year mark and we're making some changes to make things work better as we go. But our ultimate goal is to save kids, get them out of bad situations, and obviously prevent offenders from offending against new children. So it's worked very well. And I'm grateful to be part of this because I'm with a bunch of people that have a common mission, and we've done good things in making our community safer. So the added value of the NGO partner, as we mentioned, we've got the enforcement, education, advocacy. That advocacy component's been huge. We actually had a recent op in which we had some state legislator people come out. That's obviously great to have them see us in action because they're able to know what the new laws, as Jim mentioned, the new statute that's coming into place under North Carolina law in December. They're able to see the fruits of that. We're able to give real-time feedback on how that's going to affect law enforcement efforts. And they're there to talk to us. Usually when you're in the advocacy realm, you're there to talk to the legislator person, and they've got a very limited time. In this particular case, they came out to see us in action, and we had a captive audience. So that was very good from a standpoint of having the Invictus NGO component where they're able to advocate for us and say, hey, look, this is the efforts that our law enforcement partners are making. We have to have these three things. So we need a go-getter, we have to have someone fight for them, and we have to have a mission. And that's something that we found has been key to success this year. And I think it's going to be a key going forward for us. Hey, Jim, how are we on time? I don't want to run us out where we're not able to answer questions if you have stuff coming in.
Yeah, Jim, how are we on time right now?
Ray, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Well, we just wanted to make sure that we wanted to leave time for questions.
Yes.
I will echo what Brooke said earlier. It's very difficult to do this in a 30-minute session. So we want to make sure we give plenty of time for questions.
And we've had some questions come in, so maybe we should go ahead and go to that point. I would say that Zach and I have been together in Rowan County for a presentation to law enforcement, and Ray and I have some experiences together in the past. And as you can see, these men are very serious, and all three men and one lady are all very serious in what they're doing. One question that came in was, any thoughts on how to get into the schools? We seem to get a lot of pushback, and it's very frustrating. Maybe open that up to the four of you, and somebody want to kick that off. Any ideas?
Well, I can kind of speak about how we have overcome that to a degree. And, you know, it's specifically for us is that we have, once again, worked with our state partners and crafting a message, right? But having that official OGA presence, the official government agency presence with the task force does allow us to, you know, we're making a lot of noise in this space. So a lot of the schools are reaching out to us and saying, hey, can you come and do a presentation? And a lot of the private and charter schools who've had no issues getting into those schools, they're requesting us. We're not soliciting them, but also from our public school partners, we've had a lot of opportunities to be able to speak to their staff and their social workers and those kind of things. And I think ultimately it's being able to show ourselves as a trusted partner and having that official government support through the message being from our sworn law enforcement officers, like Zach had alluded to. That's huge, right? Being able to have that nonprofit partner that helps craft that message and having it approved through our local law enforcement agencies, which then in turn gives that school system a sense of security about who this message is coming from and how effective it's going to be for their students.
One thing I can throw out when did a lot of work with Shared Hope is kids for us were the best tool. In other words, students within the school we would talk to, and then as they would go to their guidance counselors and go to their student councils, that was very effective. We got into a lot of schools up in Washington State that way. And parents, getting parents to, kind of rattle some things and begin to talk to, the principals and the guidance counselors. So we kind of took a bottom work up on that, and it actually was pretty effective. So.
I'm very appreciative of you being here, Brooke, and also like to mention I'm very appreciative of having 3 men here, because what I'm finding out so often as I go around, it seems to be the women are taking charge and trying to solve this problem, and where are the men and what are they doing? And I'm just wondering how are some other ways that men can participate in fighting trafficking besides the work that you're involved in now? What else can the men do to get on board with this?
I'll tell you one thing I tell guys is take your skills, business skills. If you got business skills, a lot of nonprofits want help on their board of directors. So if you've got those kinds of skills, accounting or business management or fundraising, there's a dearth out there really of nonprofits that would love to have their help.
Yeah, one thing I would mention, and that I also believe, is that I 100% agree with what Nick had said. The Invictus Project is no different. We have a platform in which volunteers can come and volunteer and to be able to become educated so that they can educate whatever circle of influence that they have over children. But, I would be amiss without saying that I believe that the number one issue or the number one place that men can make a big difference is in their home, right? The kids that you're in contact with, be present. Take an active role in saying, you know what, in this 3-foot circle that I occupy with my family, I am going to keep it safe. And it starts there. And I believe that cannot be overstated. Sometimes we look outside of our immediate area to make a difference. And I know that even from the human trafficking aspect, there's been so much attention and effort placed on international trafficking. And that's where I got my start in this space but right here at home, right? That's another one of those social stigmas, that this is a problem that's over there. This is a problem where kids are in cages and in, these containers and chained in some kind of village somewhere. And that's just not the case here. We are dealing with children that are left unattended at home in their bedrooms. From a parenting perspective, we just say, hey, as long as they're in their room on their social media device, they're safe. And that cannot be further from the truth. So our message has been very clear from the beginning when it comes to the first line of defense is at home. And as a parent, we have to be present with our children.
I just gonna amen and amen and amen that. One of my sons read a book by a Navy SEAL who talked about fatherhood. And one thing he talked about, and if you're familiar with their training, is don't tap out. No matter how hard it is as a father, don't tap out. And I'm blessed to see some of, my sons follow that. And I can't say what you're saying is enough. It's kind of like, who would let everybody in the world into their kid's bedroom, like you're saying, Ray? But we're doing that through, social media. So, amen.
Yeah, I'd echo what the 2 other gentlemen said, as well as what I just saw Pam in the comments. Children are trafficked by their parents and other family members. That tends to be what we find. I think the idea of the white creeper van kidnapping kids off the side of the street That's what's captivated the American public, similar to the idea of missing kids being kidnapped by a complete stranger. We tend to find a trafficking situation, a sexual exploitation situation, tends to happen with biological family members first. So while it can be an issue with just not having good things going on at home, I think if a man is part of an organization such as a church or another organization, school maybe, there needs to be policies, procedures, and just safeguards in place. Because a lot of times when kids are victimized, it's a result of a breakdown of boundaries that should be in there, right? So, for instance, a church that has a child care program needs to have boundaries for things such as taking kids to the restroom. If there's not that policy and procedure in place, not only is the kid at risk of being victimized, but the institution is carrying a huge civil liability. Because then if the kid is victimized in the bathroom by somebody, who's the family going to go after? They're going to go after that place of worship, right? So that those policies and procedures need to be in place. And I know that's not the fun part to this. That's not the going out in the woods, finding the pedophile and dragging him to justice that that men want. But that policy wonk side of things with writing good policies and procedures down for your organization, that can't be understated.
Very good. Oh, excellent comment. And I would just add one thing is, and it has been a difficult challenge for folks, couples with our economy and moms and dads both working and trying to put food on the table and take care of things. And the children have unfortunately been neglected in some case. I think if we just remember that everyone needs and wants to be loved. And regardless of the work situation, if parents would just make sure they're loving on that child, let them know how important they are, and spending that proper time with them. If it's just a few minutes, let them know how much you love them. Excellent comments. We're getting quite a few questions coming in. Let me pop to another one. How will increasing the penalty of solicitation of a felony affect your work? Someone wants to jump on that.
Well, I would say that for in our work dealing with child exploitation, everything that we do is a felony when it deals with a minor child. We have seen some legislation that is coming effective December 1st that is going to help enhance our ability as part of these investigations and some increased penalties for some of this, especially when it comes to moving recategorizing some of the offenses when it comes to sentencing, which is hugely important. But as far as I think the solicitation of prostitution becoming a felony, I don't see how that can possibly be anything but a added deterrent to that battle.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can mention too, the legislation Ray's talking about, in addition to having that, one of the other huge legislative updates we have is generative AI. So computer generated imagery that depicts a child in a sexual manner. That's now going to be against the law in North Carolina at the state level. That's huge. We're finally getting our laws caught up with the 21st century, right? We have a sextortion statute for the first time. I know Nick mentioned the initiative involving boys and young men. We have found a huge increase in the number of financially motivated sextortion cases. And unfortunately, that's resulted in several suicides. So we're hopeful that this new legislative update, with actually having a codified sextortion offense, will hopefully, if nothing else, have a deterrent effect and have an added charge for these situations. Our legislative body has also updated the solicitation of child by computer statute. Previously, there had been some ambiguity about who constituted a person that could be solicited for sex over online, and the legislature has cleared that up to say that whether or not it's a actual child or an undercover officer posing as a child or an undercover officer posing as a parent, that does not matter. You cannot solicit an undercover officer who purports to have a minor child for sex. There had been an issue with interpretation of our previous statute. So we are hopeful that that those efforts, I guess the last one that comes to mind is the child sex dolls, which we are finding increasingly on the scenes of search warrants. Those will be unlawful for the first time in North Carolina. So a child sex doll that depicts a child for sexual gratification, that will be an unlawful device to have.
You know, the only other thing I'd add is just the marketing of these new changes in the laws are crucial too, just to get this out there to the general public, because you know how it is, we're in the vacuum, we hear about it. But to get that out, because I know like you all experience, sometimes you just talk to these guys and some just don't really understand the law at all and don't know what is happening. So somehow to get this out in the general public and market it better, if I hate to put it in the business terms, but it is something we're trying to fight, I think is crucial. And I love the new state law that you guys have, so.
Well, that brings up another question. Of the 100 counties we have in North Carolina, how did these counties get involved with you folks? What can they do to work with you?
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, you feel free to just shoot us an email. Again, we're leading demos of that new platform weekly. We led 6 last week, and we've talked about how limited staff can be with our law enforcement partners. And so sometimes you schedule a meeting with a human trafficking task force, and it's one person that shows up and they say, well, here I am, I'm the task force. So getting us connected to any individuals that would like to get involved, it can be as simple as that. So we would welcome it.
And if any civilians want to start teams like we've done, we've got one in Greenville, North Carolina, and starting 2 around where Ray is. So if any civilians want to look at what we do, certainly email us.
And for you folks listening in, if there's anything at all that you want to get involved with anti-human trafficking, go ahead and call the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. Go on their website and just say, hey, I want to do something. What can I do? And let us try to put you with the right agency in North Carolina. We have several anti-human trafficking agencies in North Carolina, and we'll partner you with one. Any other comments in that area?
I'm seeing Amy's question on that. I think it comes down, like Ray said, I think the difference that we had in really getting the ICAC component on board was having that official government authority essentially on board, because there's a lot of nonprofits in the space, right? And there's a healthy skepticism due to some dumb things that have happened. And so sometimes you have to have that willing agency, and we did have to overcome that, right? So HSI was on board because we were already in this space with our North Carolina ICAC component with State Bureau of Investigation. Our understanding of what Invictus Task Force was going to be was, again, a force multiplier for good, right? So not a replacement of North Carolina ICAC, but rather a supplementation. In order to get a county on board or a municipality, I think one, you're going to have to have the need, right? Which everyone has that need, but also we found that it's got to be an agency that's relatively small, and maybe the combined resources of having a couple law enforcement partners together would help. So, for instance, we wouldn't solicit Greensboro as the first agency to ask, because that's a pretty large agency. They already are able to cover their forensic needs. They already have a very active special victims unit. They don't necessarily need to roll in with somebody in order to have that force multiplier effect. Rural county like Randolph County works well because they partner with Davidson, which is right next door, and they partner with Alamance, which is right next door to Randolph. And then Forsyth, which is bigger, but decided that, hey, we'll try this out. So I think you have to have that, and then you have to have willing department heads. Obviously, we had 4 sheriffs. That's 4 elected officials, but they were willing to set aside political differences and set aside maybe operational differences in order to allow for a combined operational posture that ended up working out.
I think I have time for one more question. I noticed your counties involved are rural counties. Since inception, are most of the child youth targets female or male? Have you seen gang cartel activity? Anybody want to jump on that one?
Zach, I think you ought to address that.
The cartel activity?
Yeah.
I think there can be some cartel activity and gang activity. I mean, again, I work from a background. I was a sheriff's office deputy, task force officer. So my background is again from more of the internet crimes basis. I think there's a misconception maybe that there's a more of that top-down trafficking. And I think what you tend to see is more of that bottom-up trafficking, right? So you have an at-risk child, an at-risk teenager that ends up falling into it as a result of gangs and cartels that are already there, right? A lot of these organizations, if you want to call them multi-crime syndicates, that they're I don't know what the right word is, but they're involved in several different criminal enterprises, right? You don't have a cartel out there that's solely focused on child exploitation. You don't have a cartel out there that's solely focused on drug trafficking. It's going to be something where Sinaloa cartel, for instance, they've got their fingers in everything. They're going to smuggle people, but if they can provide females to a organization that does sexual exploitation, they're going to do that as well. And that's how you have maybe a migrant that ends up in a sex trafficking situation. So I don't know if it's necessarily rural as much as it's there. It's there just like it is in a more urban area, but maybe there's less resources to detect it.
Thank you. Well, this has been wonderful. I mean, the information has been outstanding. You folks are so dedicated to what you're doing. It's so refreshing to me as a partner with you to be involved with you folks. We do have 2 more webinars coming up. I want to mention that again on November 13, Survivors, Firsthand Stories and Experiences. And then November 20th, recent legislation relating to human trafficking and a call to action. I also wanted to mention, I really appreciate the legislators that have come on board with us. You know, there have been several of them that are working really hard. They have a heart for what we're doing, helping us to fight against human trafficking. And I just want to show my appreciation to them. It's been my honor today to be your host and moderator. You folks are doing an excellent, wonderful job, and you're so busy. And the fact that you would take some time out today to talk to all of us is really appreciated. And with that, unless there are any other comments, I'm going to wish you all well and hope to see you soon in the future. God bless you. Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, sir.